How the meat industry harms the environment. Do you worry about climate change and how the earth is getting damaged every day? Is there something you'd like to do to start a change? Well, it's time to eat less meat. I used to be skeptical on how eating less meat could change the environment. However, after doing vast amounts of research, I came to the conclusion that it does have a big effect on the environment. Climate change is a very real and serious situation that I've noticed a lot of people don't take so seriously today. However, if we don't do something to stop it now, then eventually it'll be too late and the earth will eventually become uninhabitable. The meat industry causes an excess of pollution, unnecessary land and resource use, and accelerates climate change. But if you were to just stop eating a little bit less meat, then you would make a big difference. First, we're going to talk about how big of a carbon footprint the meat makes. A carbon footprint is the amount of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases that are released when creating a certain good. Every plant and animal has a carbon footprint. As humans breathe in oxygen and let out carbon dioxide, so does every other animal, and plants release greenhouse gases. However, there's a difference in between how big or how big of a carbon footprint there are between each animal and each plant. If you were to compare our carbon footprint to that of a cow, you'd see a big difference in how much carbon dioxide and methane we produce. According to Steve Lambert of the Global and Mail in the newspaper published on April 12, 2004, the current belief is that cattle produce 19 megatons of greenhouse gas emissions a year in Canada, or about 3% of the country's total. And if you think about that, that's only cattle that produce 3% of the country's total, not including every other animal that produces greenhouse gas emissions too. Only cattle produce 3%. As the human population is rising, we need more food, more land, more resources. And as we all know, the higher the demand, the higher the production of any product. In this case, the product is meat. And we need more land to raise these animals, and that leads to the chopping down of trees and pasteurizing of lands. Do you remember when the Amazon rainforests were on fire and everyone was freaking out? The reason why they were on fire was because meat industries needed more land for their cattle, and they burnt down 310,000 acres of the Amazon rainforest just to keep their cattle. You also needed to take account how much water and food they consume. If we were to use all the water and food that we give to animals on ourselves, on like humans who need food, then we would have much more food on our tables. According to Elena Seeley of Food Tank in a news article published on November 28, 2016, the global average of water footprint, or the total amount of water needed to produce 1 pound of beef, is 1,799 gallons of water. 1 pound of pork takes 576 gallons of water. Climate change has to do with a multitude of things, and it's a natural thing that has occurred since the beginning of Earth. As I said before, every animal and plant has a carbon footprint. However, ever since the Industrial Revolution, the rate at which climate change occurs has skyrocketed. According to Tuomo M. Salorenta of Geographical Institute, University of Bergen, Norway, in Post-Normal Science and the Global Climate Change issue published in September 2001, environmental pollution, increased rate of extinction of species, and climate change are just a few examples of how natural sciences in the late 20th century affect the environment. Factories, transportation, electricity, and energy are all things that accelerate climate change, but so does the meat industry. Meat industries accelerate climate change because of the pollution that it creates and the land that it takes up. It damages the earth and overall speeds up the process of climate change because of the harm that it does to the earth. This is a graph of the average annual consumption of meat per person in the US. So if you look at 2018, the average person consumes about 100 kilograms of poultry annually, 55 to 60 kilograms of pork annually, and 35 to 40 kilograms of beef annually. And if you stop and think about it, most Americans have meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, an excess amount of meat that we honestly don't need. You can substitute meat in most meals for something else that's a lot healthier for you and a lot better for the environment. The difference in the carbon footprint between beef and vegetables or lentils is astronomical. Beef has one serving of steak leaves 330 grams of carbon, and lentils, for example, which is also high in protein, leaves 2 grams of carbon. So, learning everything that we've talked about today, think about yourself and your own eating habits and how you can make a change and how you can substitute certain things to make a greater difference on the earth. Before eating a harmless steak, consider everything that went into making that steak and how it will harm the environment. Meat industries produce tons and tons of pollution. They use up lots of land and other resources and ultimately accelerate climate change. There has to be a change somewhere, and even if it's small, it will make a difference. Doing something as simple as skipping out on that steak will stop 330 grams of carbon going into the air. So think about that next time you go to the grocery store. Thank you.